Hello, folks. Welcome to Jeremy Hadler's YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jeremy Hadler, and today we still continue the GOAT series, and we're doing right tackles, right side, not the blind side, the opposite side. And of course, we have our special guest once again doing our offensive line, Mr. Zachary Grazik.
Woo! Thank you, Jeremy, for having me on. Excited
Okay.
about right tackles. I feel
Yes.
like this one could be a good one. It's not the most exciting position, but I think that we have some passion for some of these players and looking forward to getting into it.
Before Zach gives us our definition of what a right tackle is, make sure you leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. We're about 10 subscribers away from 250. Almost there, guys. But before we start with that, let me remind you guys about the GOAT series rules if you haven't already been familiar with. Like I say it every episode just to refresh everybody's minds. I pick 5 players, and then I pick an honorable mention with a special guest like Zach. He has the option to choose an honorable mention if he wants to or not. So that's the option I give when I have special guests come on, not ranked whatsoever. And this is based on their achievements, the impact they made in the field, and how they changed the game a bit too. So that's what we're looking forward to. And then at the end of our list, we choose our ultimate GOAT of who we think is the greatest player at this position. And they have to be really known for their position. That's the one criteria I really emphasize on. It's not two-way if it's like Deion Sanders or CB and kickoff return. No, they got to be known for this one position their entire career. Zach, what is a right tackle?
Right tackle is the, not surprisingly, farthest right player on the five-man offensive line. The tackles, especially in the more modern day, to me, they're mostly not, I shouldn't say mostly, but they're more known for their pass protection because they need to get off the snap. They need to have good feet, need to have good hands to keep those dangerous edge rushers all around the league that are faster today than ever, help protect the quarterback, and also, of course, run block as well. You can pull as a tackle. It's a little different because when like you're a guard, you like go behind the offensive line, but when you're the right tackle, there's no one really there to run behind except maybe a tight end. They can still make little pulls outside. A very important position. Right tackle, most teams don't value it a ton because, as you said already, it's not the blind side, but it is still very important. Let's get into some of the best ones of all time.
So we got that as our definition of what a right tackle is, but we let the guest of honor start with the honorable mention first. So Zach, who is your honorable mention?
Okay, people, for our honorable mention, the only current player to make the list and the best right tackle in the game right now. Eagles fans, you just had Jason Kelsey. Now we have Lane Johnson on the list. Lane Johnson has played 10 years so far in the NFL, still playing with the Eagles, all 10 years with the Eagles. He was the fourth overall pick in 2013. He has made 4 Pro Bowls in the last 5 years, 2 first team All Pro, 1 second team All Pro, 1 career touchdown catch. I just found that fun. And he made the 2010s All Decade team. Lane Johnson, as I was saying with Jason Kelsey, he is one of that Mount Rushmore of Eagles players who've been there for a decade. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey,
Definitely.
and paved the Lane Johnson. And I just think that has been so crucial to their success. I think it has given the Eagles one of the best locker rooms. But let's get into the actual play. Let's not just talk about the locker room. Lane Johnson plays hard off the ball. He can pull inside and out. He is amazing in the pass protection. He has fought off guys like Nick Bosa in years past. He played Nick Bosa in the playoffs with like a broken rib, shut him down. You can watch the tape. He has fought through a lot of injuries in his career, sadly.
Yeah.
And he had like he missed most of the
Yeah.
year for mental health, I remember. He hasn't allowed a sack since November of 2020 in the regular season. I think playoffs maybe one, but in the regular season, he hasn't allowed a sack since November of 2020. And he was drafted as a left tackle, quickly made the move though to right tackle because of Jason Peters, who was there at
Yeah.
the time. And just an amazing player. I mean, people say, oh, he's injury prone, whatever. Oh, like, he has like bad games every now and then. But the thing is, you can't underappreciate what we have today. Like, people from the 1970s had bad games too. Lane Johnson fights through injuries like no one else. He's an amazing player. I mean, come on, no sacks allowed since 2020, since the birth of COVID. And that is why we have him on the list.
All right. I like the pick. Me personally, I wouldn't take him, but that's a great. I like him a lot, so I have to give praises where it's due there. Amazing player also, just with Lane Johnson and how he's fought through the injuries and the mental health. That's something that's really stuck out to me. He just keeps fighting through like anything that's thrown at him. He powers through and is like part of that offensive line, as you mentioned, with Jason Kelce. They're the power, and that's why the Eagles are so good. It's because that offensive line with Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce. You don't have those guys. Eagles would not be good without them. Now, that's despite like with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, all the great talented players, Jalen Hurts. Those two are what make the Eagles very successful, in my opinion, because you don't have a good offensive line, you aren't going to be successful. That's how it is in this league. You can go look at Super Bowl winners and how they built their franchise. The Chiefs, we can go like example. We saw in COVID when they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. They didn't have an offensive line. That cost them the Super Bowl. How many times did Mahomes get sacked? Too many times. How many times did we see it against Joe Burrow? Got sacked too many times. Now, unfortunately, it didn't work out for the Eagles in this past Super Bowl, but that's the thing that really sticks out to me is you have to have a great offensive line, and Lane Johnson makes that a huge, great offensive line. So I'm a fan of the player. I don't like the honorable mention here. I got another guy I like to pick who had higher achievements, in my opinion. Now, my honorable mention. This is the Frank Gore of the list, which is very rare to have an honorable mention as a Frank Gore. That's very rare. And for folks that don't know what the Frank Gore term means, it means the most amount of years they play at their position. This guy played 20 seasons in the NFL. Nobody does that. You'll rarely see that today, folks. That is Jackie Slater. Jackie Slater played with the Rams. Now, that includes the Los Angeles Rams and the St. Louis Rams because they moved back and forth, but it was 1 year in St. Louis before the merger and everything. The majority of time was with Los Angeles. 4-second team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, made the Rams Hall of Fame, and retired the Rams. You got to be very good to last that long, which is the thing that stuck out to me is how his endurance and longevity stood out to me. That's why I put him here on this list. It's just because of that. But he was great with the hands, the agility too. The footwork is really what stuck out to me and how he pulled, like as Zach always mentions, when you're pulling. But the pass protection too, that's amazing. It stuck out to me. So he's an amazing player, an underappreciated player. I believe that should get recognition on this list. So I have Jackie Slater on my list here. An interesting fact about him, though, I like to mention this about him. He dealt with 24 different quarterbacks, 37 different running backs, and he helped 7 running backs get 1,000 rushing yards. That includes Lawrence McCutcheon, Wendell Tyler, Eric Dickerson, most people will know by now, Charles White, Greg Bell, Cleveland Gray, Jerome Bettis, who was part of the Rams, but then he got traded to the Steelers. In 170 games, he helped a runner gain 100 yards. So if that's something that really stuck out to me, that is something that really stuck to me. Also, the pass blocking too, you have to have great passing as a right tackle, but that's the thing that helped out to me. He would take like some of the greats that were great and some of the lows who were not so great, and he helped them through. He would still get them through to get that what he wants, 100 more yards per game or get to 1,000 yards per season. That's something that stuck out to me. So that is why I'm putting him here on my honorable mention list. Did you have anything to say about him?
Yeah, Jackie Slater, one of the ultimate just journeymen playing 20 years. He never made first team All Pro, but like in the NFL, it's just so hard to play 20 years and even be good. So very deserving. Yeah, like a lot of those running backs you said I've never even heard of. So how he helped them get 1,000 yards, very impressive and a good honorable mention for sure.
Let's move on to our next player, which this guy played with one franchise, the same as Jackie Slater just did. And so is Lane Johnson so far as of right now. We don't know yet if he's getting traded or whatever. Probably not. But this guy played 13 seasons with the Cardinals. That is Dan Diedorf. 3 first-team All-Pro, 3 second-team All-Pro, made the Pro Bowl 6 times, made the 70s All-Decade team, made the Hall of Fame. He got inducted to the Cardinals Ring of Honor. And he, interesting fact about him, became a broadcaster for 29 years as an NFL announcer. So that's an interesting fact about him. The things that really stuck out to me, the technique, as I mentioned, longevity too, how long he stayed, like not like Jackie Slater, but like getting up there to the range. The agility too, he was a bit undersized and he still would do great pass protection with the hands. What did you think about him?
Yeah, Dan Dierdorf. I like to call Dan Dierdorf the Joe Thomas of the 1970s and 80s because the Cardinals were a bad team when he played for them. Like, fun fact, the reason that Dallas Cowboys play on Thanksgiving, it used to be the Cardinals, but they changed it because the Cardinals were too bad and they just kept losing. So it's just like he played on a very bad team, but he was an unbelievable player. And the main thing that sticks out to me is his pass blocking. He plays with this amazing leverage. He's very steady in the hips. He keeps the defenders off him. He doesn't let the defenders get into him. He gets into them, and this holds him off. Played with a lot of quarterbacks, played with a lot of bad teams, a couple playoff teams. He also went 3 years without allowing a sack. That is pretty hard, especially on a bad team, because the quarterback on bad teams will just sit back there and not know what to do and just do nothing for 10 seconds. He still didn't allow a sack for 3 years. One of my favorites. His run blocking was good too. And announcer.
It's interesting fact about how he was well known for being broadcasting too that not many fans know about. So that sucks for me. I mean, you can go ask Cleveland Brown fans of how they've had to deal with terrible quarterbacks. Sorry, Zach, but that's how it's been for them where they don't know. And you can go look at that jersey meme where it has a list of players of like
27 before Baker ended it for a little while.
So if that's what it is there, folks, is where Dan Diedorf was a part of terrible quarterbacks and with a bad team, so powerful. So Dan Diedorf has to be mentioned on this list we have here. Let's move on to our next player, which this guy played 15 seasons. The majority of the time was with the Minnesota Vikings. Again, I don't like the Vikings whatsoever. It's a bitter rivalry. That is Ron Yary, one-time NFL champion, made the first team All-Pro 6 times, made the second team All-Pro 2 times, made the Pro Bowl 7 times, made the 70s All-Decade team, made the Vikings Ring of Honor. Things that really stuck out to me when I'm watching him, the speed, the agility of how he was able to move fast and quick, and how aggressive he was. The aggressiveness of how he would just go right at the opponent. Like Zach mentioned with Dan Diedorf, he would go right at the opponent, put the hands out, right, do that with the pass protection. Hard work, he was too. The size, I mean, he was big, but like a little undersized in my opinion compared to other right tackles. That's the thing that stuck out to me. What do you think about him, Zach?
Yeah, Ron Yary. When watching film, which there's not much to watch. I found some. He really just sticks out with his size, and he played really good ball. And the thing that I think of with Ron Yary, I mean, of course, I didn't get to watch every Ron Yary snap ever, sadly. But you just think with the quarterback he had was Fran Tarkenton for most of his career. And Fran Tarkenton was really one of the first quarterbacks ever who loved to scramble the ball and run. So when you think of a right-handed quarterback like Tarkenton, he's naturally going to run to the right side, which is where Yary was. And those of you who play Madden or real football know that when the QB is scrambling, it's really hard for those tackles to keep their block. But he did that very well. He played a very distinct brand of ball that really worked for those old Vikings teams. And he's a Hall of Famer and a great player for the list.
All right, let's move on to our next player. This guy played 15 seasons with the Oakland Las Vegas Raiders, because that's how it's scrambled back in the day of like when they moved and everything, like I mentioned with Jackie Slater of how it was Los Angeles and St. Louis. That's how it is. It went due to NFL history. That is Art Shell. What a name. Art and Shell. 3-time Super Bowl champion, 2 first-team All-Pro, 2 second-team All-Pro. He made the 70s All-Decade team, made the Pro Bowl 8 times, made the 100th anniversary team. Interesting fact about him, he was the NFL Coach of the Year in 1990. As we go through this list here, this list has former players become known for other stuff, whether it's broadcasting or coaching. That's the thing that's going to stick out to me when we're doing this episode. But when you can watch very few highlights or try to research about him that much, great hands, the power, the pull is what I like to see him for. That was the pull. The pass protection with the feet and the technique. Him and Gene Upshaw were the anchor of that Raiders team and helped them win the Super Bowls. As I mentioned with Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce, this is the pre-Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson of how it all came together with that. What did you think about him, Zach?
Yeah, very true. I didn't even think about him. And yeah, Gene Upshaw were a great duo that won a couple of Super Bowls. Just a really strong player, really good in his pass protection. And of course, he was a very strong guy too. Something I found interesting about Art Shell is he did play a lot of left tackle too, but he played with a lefty quarterback, which was Ken Stabler. When you're playing left tackle with a left-handed quarterback, it's kind of like playing right tackle because it's not the blind side. So I'm not going to deduct points off of him for that. I just found that a little interesting. Great player. He was a coach for a while. Very strong man. Very fun to watch film of when you can find it. And a legend for the right tackle position.
As I mentioned again, without him and Gene Upshaw, I don't think the Raiders win that many Super Bowls without them, in my opinion. But let's move on to our next player, which Zach will be very happy about this player. Played 10 seasons with the Cleveland Browns. Woohoo. Repping Cleveland today here. Cleveland, this is for you, as LeBron James would say. That is Mike McCormick. He's a 2-time NFL champion, made the All-Pro 9 times. Now, this is between both combination of the first team and second team, because back then they really didn't have first team and second team. Sometimes they would just go, you made All-Pro, but they didn't give you like whether you made the first team or second team. So that's why it's All-Pro. Made the Pro Bowl 6 times. He got inducted to the Browns Ring of Honor, also inducted to the Carolina Panthers Hall of Honor, but that was because he became a general manager and president after his career. So as I mentioned again, coaches, former players of this list, beyond go great things of whether it's broadcaster coaching, GMs, president. That's what really sticks out to me, as I like to mention again on this list here. I got to see him a little bit of like what I could find about him, because every time I searched it up, it would just give me random people, because apparently there's a lot of names that had the same one. When I kept trying to find a good research articles, try to watch some film about him. The hands were what is really stuck out to me. The hands of how he played. He would not let that opponent from the defensive side get through him whatsoever. I know Zach has a lot to say, so let's give it to him.
Yeah, it's always nice to see a Brown on the list, especially solid in the top 5. Mike McCormick, as you said, one of the most impossible players to find like actual YouTube videos of. It is almost impossible. So I'm just going off what I've heard from Browns podcasts and when I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame and stuff like that. So the thing with Mike McCormick, you look at his All Pros 9 times, and the best way to see and appreciate what Mike McCormick did is watch Jim Brown and Otto Graham highlights, because he was there during the exact same time as those two were, at least for most of the part, and he really opened up some great holes, made some great plays for Jim Brown, pass protect very well, used hands well, and just helped the Browns win the couple of championships that they have before the Super Bowl era, which we appreciate since we have nothing else. You're really not a guy you hear a lot of, but it's cool to see him on the list. And if there's any really diehard Browns fans out there, I know they'll appreciate it. Really interesting how he became the Panthers general manager. I didn't know that. And these right tackles just keep doing stuff. And it's kind of funny. Shout out Mike. Dog pounds with you, Mike.
Absolutely. An interesting fact about him I'd like to also mention, he was involved in a 15-player trade to be acquired by the Cleveland Browns. That was from Paul Brown at the time, and Cleveland Brown fans know him very well. Named after the team is what he's known for, but one of the great coaches too. And that was one of his best moves of Paul Brown's career to help Cleveland Browns to be great. So that's an interesting thing, a 15-player trade. I didn't know about that until I researched it. So that's an interesting thing to see about that. Might have gone down as one of the best moves for the Cleveland Browns organization to do that. Let's move on to our last player here. This player played 15 seasons. The majority of time was with my team, the Green Bay Packers. 14 seasons was the occurrence. That is Forrest Gregg. Forrest. Now, every time I hear the name Forrest, I think of Forrest Gump. Running, and whether it's on the side of the road, football field, or run all the way to the desert, as I like to say there, where he's growing a beard. He's always hearing that. But that's not the Forrest we're talking about. We're talking about Forrest Gregg here. Forrest Gregg. He's a 7 first-team All-Pro. Won the Super Bowl 3 times. He's a 5-time NFL champion now, as we mentioned before. This is pre-Super Bowl and right when the Super Bowl era began, so it was during that time. Made the 100th anniversary all-time team in the NFL. Made the Packers Hall of Fame. Made the 60s All-Decade team. Interesting fact about him, won NFL Coach of the Year. So as I mentioned, a lot of these guys just go on to do great things after their career. Great things after his career. Made the first team All-Pro 7 times. He's a 2-time second team All-Pro. Made the Pro Bowl 9 times. Made the 75th and 100th anniversary all-time team there. The thing that really sticks out to me, Forrest Gregg, the hands, as always, as I mentioned with Mike McCormick, cannot let the defender get past him. The agility, I mean, we saw with the Packers jet sweep, how he mentioned with Jerry Creamer, Jim Ringo. He was a part of that too with Vince Lombardi. They would keep going at perfection, and he did an outstanding job at that. The technique, in my opinion, I think he has the best technique on this list here out of all the rest of the guys. What really stood out to me, where he would go have the pass protection to help Bart Starr throw down the field to either Max McGee or other receivers, tight ends, whatever you want to call. And he also helped out with the running backs too. Too many great running backs like Jim Taylor, for example, even though he's technically a fullback like Jim Brown was, but really a running back, I like to say there. So that's another thing that stuck out to me with him. What do you think about him, Zach?
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, but you always know that you can get good blocks from Forrest Gregg. Yeah, to me, when I was watching this film, what stood out to me most was the run blocking. a little more than the pass blocking, although both were great because of that jet sweep and just that system that Vince Lombardi ran. Yeah, he has like a little guard flair to me because of how he likes to run, block, and pull. He plays more like a guard than a tackle, in my opinion. I'm not going to say too much because it's a Packer and you know best. Watch previous videos, very similar to Jim Ringo, Kramer. They all did that play and they all did it very well.
Rest in peace with him as he passed away a couple years ago. Rest of these guys on his list also rest in peace. I like to give out there because a lot of these guys, they're old players, but they passed away due to time. Some of them are still alive as of this moment, like Jackie Slater, for example, but I like to give the recognition out there for that before we choose our ultimate GOAT.
Sure, for sure.
Now, let's get to our ultimate GOAT here. Who is your GOAT for right tackle, sir?
I'm gonna go on a little rant today. You know, we like to do that every now and then. I've been quiet with Jeremy about what I'm doing with this. And you know, what you said earlier, it's about perfection at the position, right tackle only. A lot of these guys did a lot of other things outside of the right tackle, whatnot. And I know you look at the stats on the paper that we have, and yeah, Forrest Gregg, he probably like has the most achievements here. But I am not gonna pick him today because in my opinion, like, yeah, the jet sweep, everything, great. But in my opinion, Jim Ringo is the go-to that. And I did pick him, so I'm not hating. I just want to spread the love. I want to spread the love to all these other franchises out there. Here's a team that never had a GOAT. I'm 99% sure. My most underrated tackle of all time, Dan Dierdorf, is my GOAT at the right tackle position. Let me start to explain. You look at the numbers and you're like, okay, this, like what's going on? But the thing that I said is he was like the Joe Thomas of the 70s and 80s. He only played right tackle for 8 years, and one of those he got hurt. But all of his Pro Bowls, all of his All Pros, all of his second team All Pros, all came in those years. He was flawless at right tackle. They also made him play center because like they were just such a bad team that they just needed a center. So like that's like taking like imagine the Browns told Joe Thomas to play center. No, you just don't do that. But the Cardinals did that with Dan Dierdorf, and it's a shame that he only got to play 8 years at right tackle. But when I watch the film, he's just the guy that I say he can be a star tackle in the 1920s, and he can be a star tackle today. Just his soundness in his hips, his soundness with his hands in the pass protection is something that teams still love today. Like a player that reminds me a lot of Dan Dierdorf with the style is Ryan Ramczyk, former Wisconsin Badger and first round pick. Ooh. You still see players who played just like Dierdorf making all pros, being successful. Like his achievements aren't there that much, but you can't blame one awesome tackle for being on a horrible team. Yep. I love Dan Dierdorf, and sure, I could just beat a dead horse and pick another Packer, but Cardinals fans, Dan Dierdorf, the GOAT right tackle, let me hear about it in the comments. Thank you.
I think you were going to go that way. I thought you were going to go for another player that I thought was going to happen. But for me, this comes down to two players, in my opinion. Now, obviously, I'm going to put Forrest Gregg up there. So everyone knows that the Packers fan, obviously, we're going to put him up there. Another player, I don't want to do this, but I have to give it the respect due to this. I have to give the respect to it. Ron Yary is up there too. Now, he might not have won the championships. Now, thank you for that. But the achievements, too, of how he had the first team All-Pro 6 times, the 2-time second team. But the things that really starts me, the agility, the hard work of how he would go through the ethnic of the size, how it would played out like compared to other right tackles, like give it to their size. He would be so good with the speed and the agility and still power through it. That's the real thing that starts me. And 15 seasons too. To me, it's really come down to these two players. And he also made the Pro Bowl 7 times. Now, I already mentioned Pro Bowl is a popularity contest, but still, it's consistency when I'm seeing that as a Pro Bowl. That's what I see from it. But that goes the same for Forrest Gregg, though. Now, obviously, I mentioned the jet sweep with Vince Lombardi, with Jim Ringo, Jerry Kramer, all of them. But Forrest Gregg has the most achievements. Now, I'm not going to say that's a knock on the door of like he was like with, as Zach mentioned, with Dan Diedorf being on a terrible team, but you have to give the recognition where it is. You have to give it. Now, 7 first team All-Pro. You don't see that. And I know that it's easier to get on it back then, obviously, but still, that's an achievement accomplishment. And then also making the second team All-Pro 2 times and then still being consistent and being recognized by the National Football League history of the 75th and 100th anniversary team, because half the guys back then who were so great, and we probably mentioned of being on this list or their GOATs, don't get mentioned. in today's history really that much. They don't. So for me, I have to give it to Forrest Gregg, and I don't care what anyone says. This is not being biased whatsoever, but has to be in the conversation of the achievements. How can you not look at it? It's like looking at Tom Brady and you just say best achievements. You don't call him like one of the greats. How is that not in there for Forrest Gregg? Honestly, is my opinion. Because the 5-time, yeah, it's team achievements. I get that. But still, you cannot ignore the achievements here, which is what I'm looking at here. And that goes the same for Ron Yary, too. It was very close for me. I'm sorry. Even though I hate the Vikings, I have to give recognition where it is.
Surprised. I was rooting for Ron Yary there, but I'm not surprised. I mean, Greg's up there. I love Ron Yary too, with what he did for Fran Tarkenton. It's a tough position. It's a lot of guys that we didn't get to watch, but I just love Dan Dierdorf. I feel like if he was on Packers when Vince Lombardi played, he could have all those Pro Bowls too. So it's really hard to say. It's hard to say.
That is our list here, ladies and gentlemen. Before we head out, leave your thoughts because we need thoughts here of who you think should be mentioned on the list, who you think should get more recognition, who should be the GOAT on this list, who should be, because most people don't like right tackle. And you can go look that in the NFL today of like not many great right tackles, despite Lane Johnson's the only exception of being an awesome right tackle, but no one really cares about the right tackle. I'm sorry. That's how it is today's. Leave in the chat if you think it is. And for our next episode, which is going to be the most popular position, is The Blind Side. You can go look at The Blind Side of the movie. Great movie. So you can go check that out. But before we head out once again, let's give a round of applause to our special guest, Mr. Zachary Branzik.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun today. We definitely went on some rants and had a good time. Had a good time. Continue the rants in the comments, everyone. Continue them.